Okay, friends, welcome to the Fantasy Baseball Beat, part of the Pitcherless family of podcasts. I'm Mike Carter, and you can find me on Twitter with the worst Twitter handle of all time at MDRC0508. Don't ask what it means, I'll tell you later. I'm flying solo for our beat writer interview this week, and to me, it's a special guest for me because, as you know, who listen, I am a diehard White Sox fan, and lately, the last couple of years have not been super kind to my fandom. We have tonight with us Scott Merkin, who's been covering the White Sox for, is it 23 years now, Scott? Or is it more
years,
than that?
Yeah.
23 years.
I go by manager. We'll see if I can do it really quick. Ozzy 8, Robin 5, Ricky 4, so that's 17. Tony and Cairo, Miguel Cairo, who's now managing again, 2, that's 19. Pedro and Grady 2, 21. 1 for Will, 1 for Jerry Manuel my first year, so 23.
Man, that's wild. That's a lot of turnover in 23 years.
Yet I can't remember where my car is parked, so that'll be that's the sad thing.
Well, luckily it tells you on your phone now where your car is parked,
that's right?
So
that's right.
Scott's joining us to talk about the White Sox, my beloved White Sox, and he's seen a few things in those 23 years, as he just mentioned, not only managerial changes, but also a lot of really good teams and some not really good teams here the last couple of years. Scott is a big-time Michigan fan, a Michigan alum, also a big Yacht Rock fan. If you follow his newsletter, you should be doing that if you're not doing it.
Can't wait for Thursday. And the Christopher Cross Toto Men at Work concert in August, of course.
Oh, that's going to be amazing. Amazing.
Like you should retire Yacht Rock after that concert because it's not going to get any more Yacht Rock than that.
No. Maybe a little, Donald Fagen or Steely Dan maybe in there
Michael
too.
McDonald, right? Michael McDonald. If you put the Doobie Brothers in there too, you might have it covered.
You'd have it
Donald
be done.
Fagen and Steely Dan are good too. That's a good choice.
Yeah, for sure. So Scott, you've been on a couple of times with us before, years past, and last year when you were on, it was a pretty quick show because we didn't have much to talk about. But the White Sox right now are 31-62, but yet it feels very different this year to me as a fan and as somebody who watches the team. I know that you're with them every day and watching what's going on. Talk a little bit about your overall impressions of the team this year.
Well, I think it's just a different stage of the rebuild, right? I mean, you have a lot of the young. This is what the rebuild really is at the core of the rebuild. Nothing against the veteran guys who came in there. I mean, you look at a guy like Chris Flexen, who went 22 straight starts without a win last year. Mm-hmm. And now he's a huge part of the Cubs division leading team in the NL Central. That lead is shrinking a little bit over there. Chicago baseball. You got to be careful along the way. But nothing against veterans, but this is what it's all about, right? You have all these young guys. I think it's 10 rookies on the team and 11 who made their major league debut this year. And or maybe it was the White Sox debut. I know it's 10 rookies, but you're seeing at bats for Chase Meidroth. You're seeing at bats now for Colson Montgomery, which is great to see him up. Sean Burke, even Davis Martin, who's not that young, but in terms of service time, but is younger. Mm-hmm. Shane Smith has been a great story now, an all-star. Kyle Teel, Edgar Caro. So that's what it's about. You let these guys learn this year, and then maybe by, at the latest second half, let's say even just not even the latest, second half next year, you have a team that's competitive.
Mm-hmm. The philosophy with the young guys coming up seems to be that they're willing to let them sort of learn on the job and take their lumps, doesn't it?
Well, yeah, let's be honest. They're 31 games under 500, right? I was with a friend at dinner tonight, and she was saying that, if they win 69 in a row, they're going to win 100 this year, which would be a franchise record, by the way. 99 is their single season high. But all joking aside, I don't think they had any thoughts that they were going to be a playoff contender this year. So with that, you can allow young guys who are very talented to have their growing pains, have their rough starts here and there, and, have their 1 for 20 stretches while learning about big league life. And you talk to a guy like Jordan Leisure, who got the save in the win against Toronto in the series finale, ending the Blue Jays' 10-game winning streak. And he talks about how much he gained from last year. And it wasn't even a great overall season for him. He had a good start and then a really bad finish. Mm-hmm. And he feels like he's learned a ton just from being part of that group last year. So, I think it makes a lot of sense. It's the way you do it now. You're going to have to spend at some point. I'm not saying it's going to be this offseason because, it just may not be the time. And Chris has kind of hinted at that. And I'm not saying you have to go out and have a Dodgers payroll. I'm not saying you have to have anything close to that. You look what the Royals did last year, right? The Royals had calculated spending. They added Michael Wacha. They added Seth Lugo. They already had Perez in place. Now, you can do a lot of calculated spending when you have Bobby Witt on your team, obviously, right?
Yeah,
that's
right.
A great equalizer. Vinny Pasquantino has emerged as a great player. Now they have Caglione, who homered again tonight up there. But, I think it's something along those lines. Maybe identify a big guy and then kind of fill in around him. But that doesn't have to be next year. It could be the offseason after that or even the one after that. But you do have to add. You do have to add on to finish this off because, as I forgot who pointed this out to me, I think it might have been Ben Attendee who said this, that very few, if any, teams win just on prospects alone. So you're going to have to add key veteran pieces there to get there. But that's not what we're looking at right now. Right now, we're looking at the development stage. And, of course, as we're talking now, 22 days until the trade deadline, right? So that's the next the draft is the next big step. And then after that, it's the trade deadline.
Yeah. You had a great tweet about Colson Montgomery the other day that I thought was worth sharing again, that you suggested that Montgomery would really take off on this stage because he really seems to like the big stages. And so far, he really looks like he fits the part. What do you expect to see from him in the second half, Scott?
I mean, I haven't seen a ton of his games overall his career. I've seen some AFL games. I haven't seen him play in the minors. But he looks as comfortable as I've seen, counting Cactus League stuff, too. He looks really – and I know the players hate that comfortable word because it seems almost kind of like too easy. He looks as confident and fit in as he fits in as much as I've seen him. Here's what I think. Like, I admit that I am not the biggest analytic person of all time. I kind of look at the story and the scene. Colson Montgomery was a top-notch Indiana high school basketball player, along with football and baseball. But as he told me, Indiana basketball is not like a choice. It's a religion. And if you can handle that stage, I think literally you can handle any stage. I think he'll be fine on that. And I think it's, I think it's good. I remember talking to Gordon Beckham, who was, back before there was a rebuild. He was like their big hot prospect. And he said that he wishes he would have had a few struggles. These guys that come in, guys like Colson, they never struggle, right? I mean, they're the stars of their high school team at every level. They usually play very well in the minors. So I think when they first struggle, it's a little bit of a slap in the face. Little startling, but it's better to do it at Charlotte for a year and a half than it is to do it for a year and a half at the major leagues and then be completely lost against top-notch pitching on top of it, So I just think he's a primetime guy. I think, and I'm not saying he's going to end up hitting 30 and stealing 30 and driving in 150, but boy, that'd be great, wouldn't it?
Yeah, true.
But I think he's going to perform well at this level. And again, it's just 6 games now, right? But I think he's going to be. He's looked very good defensively, and it's funny because. Much like when Tim Anderson was drafted, you heard a lot, I think, because Colson's bigger. He's of the Corey Seager prototype, very good athletes. Oh, he can play third, maybe even can play left. We always heard for Tim, second base, maybe center. And both of them were determined, like, nope, I'm a shortstop. I'm going to make this work. Not make this work. I'm going to excel. And, we watched today when we were waiting for Will to come out to talk to him pregame. Colson going through his work on the field pregame with Justin Jerschley, who's a great coach, too, by the way.
Yes.
And also knows Colson from managing him at Charlotte. So, he's ready to, to put in the time to be an excellent shortstop and stay in that position. And it would be of great help to the Sox because, Chris Getz is very focused on up the middle strength.
Yes. Yeah, they really need him to play shortstop. I've said that to people who are casual fans of the team who've made the same suggestion about him moving to third. Is it maybe down the road?
They need him to play well more than anything else. They need him to hit and play well. And if it ends up being third, that's fine. But it would be a bigger boon if he was a shortstop, obviously, if that worked out like they had planned.
For sure. Scott, another guy that has really kind of come along this year, Miguel Vargas has gone from a meme punchline last year to one of the best players on the team this year. Can you talk a little bit about the changes that you've seen him make to his game to lead to his success this season? Even though he's slumping a little bit right now, he's still hitting the ball really hard.
Yeah, it's interesting because, he did have an awful stretch with the Sox last year. I mean, really bad. And he, to his credit, he kind of has fun with it, but, we'll ask him about it. He's like, yeah, I don't remember anything about last year. And that's good. I don't blame him. Put that aside. And, it's got to be a shock to the system when you're playing for the best team in baseball, the team that wins the World Series, which he got his ring when the team was in LA last week. Great looking ring. To going to, literally the worst team in the history of baseball, at least until the end of this season. And then he made, he started off struggling a little bit, had some good at bats in April, but wasn't hitting. They made the switch with his hands and his approach that helped. Now he's got another, now they've adjusted again to him. So now he's got another stretch to go through. I think he was like in a 4 for 48 slump before he got a hit today. So we'll see how he comes out. He's been impressive in that he plays good defense at both third and first. I'm impressed by that. He's got good hands and he seems to move well on the field. During that stretch where he was crushing the ball, he was hitting for some power too. It's all kind of evaporated in the short term. So we'll see how now he adjusts. And now it's up to him to kind of show which one is closer to him. Is it the one? I don't think last year counts at all, but is it the one who slumped a couple times during the year or the one who had that 50-some game stretch where he was, just hitting everything pretty much?
Well, he made the last out in the game on Monday night, and that ball was one of the hardest hit balls I've ever seen.
I do remember that. He did crush that ball. Now, here's the other thing. I think it's a great example to show that, he's hitting the ball hard, but you hope it evens out, because if at the end of the year you hit the ball hard 100 times and you make outs 90, it's still a 100 average, right? It's like, it's a hang with them 100, but it's still 100. So, but again, a lot of it is, not out of your control. I guess the bottom line of that is, if you hit the ball hard, you hope it finds. Like today, he hit one that I think it was David Schneider was playing. I remember who was playing third for the Blue Jays, and it was it was a play he probably could have made, but they gave him a hit, and it was hit hard enough where, to your line of thinking, which is exactly right, actually, that sometimes they even out, right? Maybe the one in center on Monday should have been caught or should have been a hit. Maybe today should have been made. The play should have been made, but it kind of evens out in the long run.
For sure. Another guy on this team that's been really interesting and a great find for the Sox is Shane Smith, who's gone from a Rule 5 pick before spring training to the de facto staff ace and now an all-star. How did he do that, Scott?
Well, I think he worked hard. He learned a change up in the offseason kind of on his own with, kind of advice from the Sox after they got him in the Rule 5, number 1 pick in the Rule 5 draft. I think he's just got a really big desire to learn, and I think they all do, but like, I've noticed with Shane, when you interview him, he doesn't just give you the answers kind of like you want to hear. He kind of listens to the questions and really digs deep to find like what he's trying to say. And I think that's how he approaches pitching too. I happened to see on the scoreboard today, they had one of those, Q&A with the players, what's your favorite vacation spot and your go-to restaurant. And it said, how would you describe yourself? And he said intense. And I think he is, but not intense like, guy hits a home run and you take a bat to the water cooler or something like that. I think he's intense like, he really doesn't like to get beat, and he's had 4 straight rough starts in a row. Although I guess he was I wasn't at the game, but I guess he was a little better against Colorado. He was better in general, a better start, and had a rough last inning. But yeah, I mean, for the first 13 starts, there was no question. Not only was he an all-star, but he would be a guy who you could see pitching up early in that game on Tuesday because he was that good. So, I know there's some people who talked about Adrian Hauser, who's been unbelievable, just a revelation in his 8 starts, but he's pitched, less innings than Shane. So I can see where that happens. But I think Shane is, deserving. I think he's deserving as the White Sox All-Star. I think it's a great story. And this is a guy who, didn't know where he'd be in December and ended up being the number 1 pick and has just taken off for the Sox. Now, I think like all these starters, they're going to have to really watch them in the second half because they're all, Davis Martin's already over his single season innings high. I think all the rest of them, except for Jonathan Cannon, are kind of approaching that total. You could see a number of, things they did with Garrett Crochet in the end last year, or maybe, they alternate the starts of where the guys go 3 innings and that's it, so it'll be interesting to see who gets traded, who gets kept, who they add to help compensate for the innings. Shane's a great story, but again, you have to be careful, watch him go down the stretch to see what you do with him.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's no doubt that some of these guys have to be getting a little bit tired. I mean, they've been going at it every 5 days now for several months. So,
well, and it's the first time for a lot of, Sean Burke came up and pitched for a few starts last year. It was great, but this is his first full big league season. Davis Martin is coming back from Tommy John rehab. I mean, he had a normal off season and made like 10 starts last year, but he's getting back into the full 30 start routine. Jonathan Cannon had kind of a full season at the big league level. Shane Smith had nothing at the big league level before this year. So you're talking about all these guys, coming back. And that's where like an Aaron Savali comes in, where he hasn't pitched great for the Sox, but he's giving them, he hasn't pitched horrible, but he hasn't pitched exactly what they wanted. But he's giving them innings, giving them pitches that, kind of not only helps the starters, but helps the bullpen too. And then Hauser goes without saying how great he's been. Oh,
for sure. Yeah, he's been a revelation, as you said. That kind of brings us to that next question, Scott, with, the trade deadline looming here in about 3 weeks and the Sox having some pieces that might be able to help some of these contending teams. Do you see the Sox moving those veteran pitchers like Savale and Hauser? Do you see a scenario where they end up keeping those guys? And do you think guys like Benintendi and Robert and Talkman and those guys are going to be on the move?
I think there's no untradables on this team. I'm not sure if they're shopping anyone per se at this point. I think things will really pick up after the draft is done on Monday night. But I think we were talking about this, and I was talking about this with one of the media relations guys today about what's the over/under on number of guys traded. And I think you could go 3.5, or you could go as high as like 6.5. I mean, I really still do believe they trade Luis Robert. I just don't. I don't think they're going to pick up his $20 million option for next year. So if you're not going to do that, I don't know why you wouldn't try to get something for him now. Maybe it's not what you envisioned last year, but because he's played great defense, he can run, he has it in him to hit and hit for power. He just hasn't done it now for 1.5 years. So that's if you're a team, I think a team that would be a good fit for Luis would be a team like the Dodgers, as an example, who have so many frontline guys like Luis, but he would be like the 7th or 8th counted on guy for that team.
Right.
Just go out, relax, do his thing, play your great defense in center, and see what you can do offensively.
Yeah, but he's then, never seemed comfortable being the spotlight guy, right? I mean, that seems like
I think he is. I think he was like 23 is. I've said this a number of times, but I think it's the most complete season I've seen from a White Sox player in 2023. What he put together. But I mean, he is. I mean, for better or worse, not for better or worse, but I mean, for right now, he is the guy that they kind of focus on in that lineup, right? I mean. I mean, they have some young guys in there, but I mean, the one you want to make sure you don't get beat by is Luis Robert, even though he is in a season-long slump. But, Adrian Hauser is going to garner a lot of attention, I think. I think Savali might garner some. Tauchman's a great player, but do they, what do they decide is what the drawing point is? Right. To keep these guys or to, trade them? I think Tauchman has another year of arbitration eligible, so, they could hang on to him. Someone like Benintendi, I think you'd have to pay some of the contract down in order to make that move. Steven Wilson's had a really good year out of the bullpens. Cam Boozer's a very talented, hard-throwing lefty. So when he comes back healthy, maybe there's enough time where teams could take a look at him. So I think there's all sorts of options for moves. And, guys could be paired together in trades for all we know.
Sure.
The only thing is, I've asked this a couple of times. I don't think any of the young guys are going anywhere. The only reason I ask that is, let's say a team had an interest in Kyle Teal, who's been great since he came up.
Sure.
But if they offer you a huge package of other young players, do you listen then? But it sounds from talking to Chris and assistant general manager Josh Barfield does such a great job on the team there too, that they really want to let these guys grow together. So I don't see any of those guys being traded. So it's more the veterans looking at. But again, I don't know if you're going to have the return of even the 8-player, 3-team traded into the deadline last year, and for sure not the Crochet deal from the winter meetings.
Sure. Yeah, I think you can't say enough about the job that Josh Barfield and Brian Bannister have done in changing the culture of the organization and building these guys into really good players. They've come up and they've shown that they're ready. Teal really looks like a guy that can really be a major contributor to the team for years.
I mean, Josh, Brian, Chris hired Gene Watson, Christian Guzman, who's the mental health coach, done a great job. A number of players talked to me about how much he's influenced them. Ryan Fuller, the hitting coordinator now, hitting director, whatever they call him. I'm not diminishing. I just don't remember what the title is off the top of my head.
Sure. No, I understand. Yep.
There's a lot of really good, and I think the staff they have in place is excellent, with Walker McKinnon and, Marcus Thames back, Ethan Katz. So, the coaching they have in Bourgeois and Jerschley, just, Matt Wise, I'm forgetting someone, Drew Butera and Joe McCabe, all these guys. But I think it's a really solid staff and, put together. Now, again, you can have the plan work to perfection. You still got to get the guys to produce, and you still got to add on to make this work ultimately.
For sure, absolutely, yeah. It's fun. It's fun again as a White Sox fan. It's interesting again to watch, and I'm really grateful for that. Scott, 2 more questions for you before I get you out of here. Again, for those of you who are just listening now, we're with Scott Merkin, covering the White Sox at MLB.com for the last 23 years. Scott, is there another minor league guy? And we just talked about there being 10 guys that are on this team making a contribution. Do you see any other minor league players that could be coming up that could make a big splash in the second half for the Sox?
I'm not sure a splash, but I think like Brian Ramos, who was kind of a breath of fresh air last year when he got called up. He had 2 homers tonight for Charlotte, including a grand slam. He's on the 40-man. Maybe that's a guy. And then I still believe, and they haven't really said one way or the other, but I don't know if you promote Noah Schultz to Charlotte this year if you don't believe that he's going to at least get like maybe 4 or 5 starts at the big league level to finish the year, because I think they really do envision him as a part of the rotation from the start next year. So I think those, we saw this at Giolito. And when I say starts, I mean, it could again be someone they add in there to pitch 3 or 4 innings at the beginning of a game and then take him out,
Right.
But I really do think that he will get a shot this year too. And there's some relievers, but I think Ramos and probably Schultz would be the main guy to look at, I think, right now.
Yeah. Do you think Grant Taylor is the closer for this team in the second half straight up?
I think he's a closer. I'm not sure what he is past 2025. Yeah. I've heard both schools of thought.
Sure.
When I had Alex Stumpf, who does a great job for us covering the Pirates, I hope I'm pronouncing his last name right. He talked to Skeens for me when the Pirates were here in Chicago. And, him and Taylor are very good friends from the LSU days. Sure. And Skeens kind of hinted, I think he said something along the lines of, he's really learning now in the bullpen. He's going to be a starter next year. And that was news to Taylor and the White Sox, I think, or they're playing it very close to the vest. But, he's just a dynamic presence. I mean, that one game he had against San Francisco, he threw 18 four-seamers and 17 were at 99 or above.
I know.
And then, the game against the Dodgers, I think he learned just as much. And he was great the next day talking about it, where he lost the zone for a bit. And I think one of the more impressive things I've seen recently is, he gives up the leadoff single to Conforto trying to protect a 2-run lead at 53,000 people. The night that Kershaw gets his 3,000 strikeout is just crazy from pitch one. Then he loses the zone. He throws 9 straight pitches, bases loaded, nobody out to Ohtani. I mean, I think no offense to Grant, we're all thinking, well, this one's going to land in like El Segundo, El Segundo,
right.
whatever it is. And he makes a great pitch. And like he said, pretty much anyone else, it's a double play, but Ohtani's, a freak of nature.
Yes,
and they end up losing the game, but he kind of figured out, and he's been good since then. So, and there's going to be those ups and downs. Like he said, he'd be naive to think he'd come in and be perfect this year. But I think he will be used as, today he was used as the setup guy. I think he'll be used as a late inning leverage guy. That's probably a safer way to put it.
That makes a lot of sense. Last question, Scott, for you before I let you get out of here. We talked a little bit about, adding. Where do you think the Sox might? I know it's just speculation on your part, but where do you think that they might add this winter?
Oh, I can't really say as of yet because you got to, you see what you're getting a look at some of these guys now. How close is Braden Montgomery, who's an outstanding prospect? I believe he's at Winston-Salem right now. I want to say.
Yep.
So how close
he's playing in the futures game this week too, right?
Right. He's playing the future with Noah Schultz. So, I think it's too early to say at this point, like where the exact specific area is going to be, because you kind of got to see, where you think you have guys that fit. Is Chase Meidroth your second baseman? Is Colson Montgomery your shortstop? So you look at that, who do you get in this draft? Who do you get at the trade deadline? So it's probably a little early to guess at what they're going to add in there. Yeah, I would guess a couple veteran arms. That always helps. So that's a pretty safe bet to go on. But aside from that, I think it's a little early.
That's awesome. Well, Scott, thanks so much for joining us. I know it's late night for you. You had a really busy day. I really appreciate you coming on with us. Can you tell our listeners where they can find your work and any special articles you got coming up next?
Sure. WhiteSox.com, MLB.com, at Scott Merkin on Twitter. This weekend is the big 20-year reunion. Mark Burley, very deserved statue dedication. I'm sure there'll be a lot of memories of Bobby Jenks shared. Very sad passing there, a bigger than life character, a Babe Ruthian almost character. So I think a lot of those we think to look at for coverage this weekend.
All right, Scott. Well, thanks so much for joining us. We'll let you get going and have a great weekend. Enjoy the festivities. And thanks for coming on with us again. We'll be right back after this commercial break.